A little while ago, the CEO of YouTube came out and basically confirmed what all of the independent content creators in the news and politics genre YouTube were already knew what was happening for a very long time. And she admitted that YouTube is actively suppressing independent news and politics content creators. They're suppressing their channels. They're making it harder for people to find their content, and instead they're boosting and propping up and recommending almost exclusively mainstream media outlets. And I say that this is confirming something we knew because um, for many different reasons. One, as a content creator, there are very weird things that we notice behind the scenes, but also there was a very noticeable and public trend that was going on for a very long time. Maybe I'd say 8 years ago was like when it was at its peak. The independent news and politics content creators on YouTube, they were getting more views than mainstream media outlets. Um, the Young Turks was the number one news and politics channel on YouTube. Secular Talk, I think, was either number two or number three. He was going back and forth with CNN. And that goes to show you how many views independent content creators were getting on the news genre years ago. And if you would post a video on a topic, CNN's video would probably get like a couple hundred views, and like Secular Talk's video would get 15,000 views, 20,000 views. So they weren't even close because nobody was coming on YouTube to watch corporate media. But ever since the 2016 election and this hysteria about fake news, and really it was also part of the direction of the advertisers who spend billions of dollars on ads on YouTube. They didn't want their ads to go on controversial videos, and all of that combined with the fake news hysteria led YouTube to crack down on independent content creators. And ever since then, you see CNN videos, MSNBC videos, ABC videos getting hundreds of thousands of views, millions of views, and things like that, and getting recommended all the time. Those are almost the only news and politics videos that get recommended anymore. You only see them on the trending page, and like I said, unless you are already subscribed to independent news content creators on YouTube, you're not gonna be recommended their videos. And this isn't like some petty personal grievance I have with YouTube. This has a very uh, big impact on the national discourse in this country because there have been a bunch of studies and polls and research on this, but anywhere from 80% to 90% of adults in the US get their news online. And another thing another point that needs to be made here is that this isn't just isolated only to YouTube, which is by itself is a giant platform that has reached to billions of people on the planet. It's not just confined to YouTube, as we've seen time and time again with all of the fake news hysteria and the censorship campaigns on these different social media platforms. They all are working in tandem. It's a coordinated, basically, cabal. We saw it with the when they did it to Alex Jones, and when they did it to Trump, and when they went after the QAnon people, and those are just some of the right wing figures that they've done it to. But they've also done it to left wing figures, Palestinian activists, and anti-war activists. When they go after them, they do it at the same time, almost unanimously in sync. So they make these decisions, and basically all of the major online sites, they agreed to these rules. So if this is the set of rules that YouTube is abiding by, and we already see how heavy the censorship has been on independent news on different platforms like Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere, then it's safe to say that YouTube's policy regarding independent news is also being adopted on these other major platforms. And it gets to the point that I was making before. 80 to 90% of people in this country get their news online. So if the content that is allowed to be displayed to people is confined and limited to only corporate media, then that's the only opinion that people get. So if people have this idea about brainwashing and they think it's more complicated than it really is, like they think, how does Kim Jong-un get the people in North Korea to go along with that bullshit and, basically worship him like he's the emperor, god, king, and most powerful being in the universe? How do they get them to go along with that? Of course, part of it is the torture, but also it's when you limit the information that people get or that they have access to, then it's much easier to control their behaviors. An example that I can give is like with healthcare in the United States, because the corporate media and because the education system, they say, oh, the spectrum of debate that is allowed is, of course, it's an acceptable position for the government to not provide you healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. And while millions of people lose their jobs and lose their healthcare, it is the acceptable position for them to still deny you single-payer healthcare, even though every other advanced country on the planet has it. And because people aren't really getting the perspective that, hey, you could actually, this doesn't even have to be a real problem because it's not a real issue anywhere else. Because they don't have that perspective, they are less likely to be out in the streets protesting, demanding their government do the bare minimum and provide them healthcare. So a lot of it's very easy to control people's behavior by limiting the information that they have access to. And so for YouTube to admit that they're actively suppressing independent news, it's honestly should be alarming to people in this country. So I have the video of the YouTube CEO's interview where there was some damning admissions there. But first, you guys already know the deal. If you're able to contribute to the show, I have the links to PayPal in the about page of the YouTube channel and in the description box. If you feel more comfortable doing it like a one-time contribution, I also have Patreon in the description box of the video and in the about page. If you feel more comfortable doing if you want to support the show on a monthly basis, you don't want to think about it, you can sign up $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever. And I don't post Patreon exclusive content, but it's just a way to help support the show. And yeah, so I'm incredibly grateful for all the people who have contributed and people who watch the videos and share the videos and people who leave all the amazing comments. Thank you guys for helping support this channel. So now I'm going to play the clip from the YouTube CEO where she basically admits to suppressing independent news content creators, and then I'll come back and break it down.
How do you think about incentivizing not just kind of run-of-the-mill sugar, not bad, but like the really good stuff? Like what's the exact inverse of the violative content?
First of all, it's really hard to say this is a content that is really great. I think you started talking about educational content. You implied with the Rubik's Cube that educational content had this higher premium. I'd say educational content is incredibly important to YouTube, and that almost everyone comes to YouTube to learn something. In fact, we just had this Ipsos study that said over 77% of people said they came to YouTube to learn something. And just anecdotally, everyone tells me how they fix something in their house. But I think what you're bringing up is one of these challenges: is what is considered good content. We do classify when it comes to information authoritative content. So if you're looking for COVID information, we actually can say, look, the health organization, your local health authority, the CDC, or whatever country you're in, or the World Health Organization, those are organizations that we can trust, as opposed to some channel that just showed up that we don't have any kind of authoritative information about. So we definitely have a concept with information about authoritative sources, and we make sure that when people are looking for information that is sensitive, that we show those authoritative sources. But if you're in the entertainment area, or you're looking how to fix something or how to learn something on an obscure topic, it's really hard to put some judgment about what is the best content that's out there.
Tell me how you think about the evolution of the algorithm right now, where it is right now. What are the key things you're prioritizing and trying to fix? And what are the things you're worried about?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think we've come a long way in our algorithm. Ultimately, we want to give information and suggest videos to our users that we think they're going to enjoy and want to see and related are to their interests. But there's a lot of caveats to that too. So first of all, as I mentioned, when we deal with information, we want to make sure that the sources that we're recommending are authoritative: news, medical, science, etc. And we also have created a category of more borderline content, where sometimes we'll see people looking at content that is, or it'll be content that's lower quality and borderline. And so we want to be careful about not over recommending that. So that's a content that stays on the platform, but it's not something that we're going to recommend. And so our algorithms have definitely evolved in terms of handling all these different content types. I'd say the plus of that is that our users are able to see higher quality content. They're also able to, we're able to make sure that they're getting information from sources that are very reliable. But I would say the con of potentially some of these changes, because as you pointed out, every change has some downside, is it may be harder in some cases for channels maybe who are getting started or smaller to be able to be visible when there is a major event, or when people are looking at something that is science or news related. But I would say that that's a trade-off that we've made, because we've realized that it's really, really important. So we learned this lesson the hard way. So when we had the Las Vegas shooting, unfortunately, there were a lot of people who were uploading content that was not factual, that was not correct. And it's much easier to just make up content and post it from your basement than it is to actually go to the site and to be able to report and have high quality journalistic reporting. And so that was just an example of what happens if you don't have that kind of ranking. So sure, we want to enable citizen journalism and other people to be able to report, and other people to be able to share information and new channels. But when we're dealing with a sensitive topic, we have to have that information coming from authoritative sources, so that the right and accurate information is viewed by our users first.
And that's not an easy trade-off. Your name is YouTube. The whole principle is that anyone can have complete free speech and publish whatever they want, or that was the founding principle. I would imagine that this is a trade-off that did not come lightly. So it's
it is. I lost you on the last second there, broke up a little bit, but you're right. We came from YouTube, and when YouTube first started, it was much more entertainment. It was much more focused on creating interesting things that you saw, funny videos. Music has always been really big on YouTube. And you definitely want to be able to break the latest artists. And so that's something that we need to think about. So when there's a new, we have so many artists who got started on YouTube. So when we have our next, some famous artist like Shawn Mendes or Justin Bieber who got started on YouTube, and they post their video, we want to be able to enable those new artists to break. But if you look at that, breaking artists or discovering the new latest small musician is very different if you're looking for something like cancer information. You don't want to see someone who is just posting information for the first time when you're dealing with cancer. You want to see it from established medical organization. And so what we've done is really fine tune our algorithms to be able to make sure that we are still giving the new creators the ability to be found when it comes to music or humor or something funny, or so many different categories: beauty, crafts, learning, how to, right? All these different areas, but we're dealing with sensitive areas. We really need to take a different approach.
All right, so first she talks about how YouTube prioritizes, quote, authoritative sources. And so she's talking about really corporate media and government press releases and things like that. And the first example she gives is COVID. And if you aren't big on like the issue of free speech and letting people make their choices about the content that they view, and you hear her say, oh, well, for COVID, of course, if people were looking for information on COVID, we have to send them to the official sources, right? That doesn't sound bad. It doesn't sound nefarious. But when you think about it like this, Dr. Fauci, a year ago, at the start of the pandemic, he was on 60 Minutes telling people, lying, telling people not to wear masks because masks don't work. So, and then a couple months later, when he flipped and then he was telling everybody to wear masks, somebody asked him, so this is completely different from what you said back in March. And then he admits to lying. He said, yes, I said that because at the time we were worried about a shortage of masks. So he's the person in charge of national health here in the United States, or the response to the pandemic. And he admits that he lied about one of the most effective tools that we had to combat the virus. So if YouTube's gonna be picking and choosing the authoritative sources, they would have been blasted, and they did blast Fauci lying and telling people not to wear masks. That video is still up on YouTube right now. So what are they going to do about that? If that's their authoritative source, that's who they were telling to listen to, and he was lying to the public about the very issue of public health. So, and then you look at what happened in New York with Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, on purpose, lied about the amount of deaths that were happening in COVID, and it was a massive cover-up, and he lied about thousands of deaths. And the New York Public Health Department went along with it. So it sounds like it makes sense. Oh, if people want to find information on COVID, if people want to find information on whatever, let's give them the official sources. But the official sources lie all the time. So YouTube should not be the one to make the decision about who's right and who's wrong. Oh, I'm only going to show, if you search COVID, I'm only going to show sources from corporate news and from the official government sources. Okay, well, they've lied about many things this entire time. And so those are the only sources people can find. And then they're going to bury any other alternative independent news sources. But not just with COVID, this is on any number of issues you can think of. Corporate media has been dead wrong, and not just wrong, on purpose lied to the public for their own agenda or to advance the agenda of a political party. The most obvious, ridiculous example was the Iraq War. They all went along with the lie of the Bush administration about Saddam Hussein attacked us on 9/11, and then the weapons of mass destruction. They're gonna, not only do they have the weapons of mass destruction, they're gonna use them on the United States. All these different lies that they were manufacturing to get us into an illegal war. Every single corporate media outlet went along with it uncritically. So if independent news was big on YouTube, as big as it is now, they would have buried all the people saying the Bush administration is lying. They're lying about the weapons of mass destruction. They're lying about Saddam Hussein working with Al-Qaeda. YouTube would have buried them and blasted all the people who were trying to lie us into a war. And any issue you can think of, corporate media lies on a regular basis to mislead the public. But simply because they're these legacy outlets and they've been around longer than everybody else, they're the quote official outlets, nobody even thinks twice about it. And we're just going to blast them. We're only going to recommend their videos, and everybody else, just because they're independent, even if they might be right on the issue, they won't even apply any level of nuance to the issue. It's simply corporate media says it, so it must be true. And everybody else who's making content from home Well, clearly those are the liars, those are the kooks, and those are the maniacs, and we can't show those videos to anybody. So the next point that she makes in the video, in her interview. All right, so then she talks about how he asked about the YouTube algorithm, and she says, you know, there's different areas to this. She says in general, we like to recommend videos that align with the user's interests, that are like related to the topic that they're looking for, and that they'll enjoy watching and things like that. And YouTube, I'm not going to get into all of the analytics and all the data and stuff like that, but there's specific metrics that they go by and they judge whether or not a video should be recommended. And some of the most important ones are the watch time, so how long people in general spend watching that video, and how often people would click the video, like if the video is recommended to them, if it's in front of them, how often people click it, the interaction rate and stuff like that. So that's how YouTube would judge. Oh, and the engagement, so the likes, the comments, and things like that. That's how YouTube judge if a video should be recommended. And you can tell in every other genre, if a video has all of those requirements, they'll be recommended. You'll see it on the trending page. You'll see it in recommended videos to play next. But she as she says there's a distinction for when it comes to news and information. So instead of, it's not just the content that the user might like and that they would watch and that's related to what they're looking for. Now they have this arbitrary rule of whether or not you can trust the source. And like I went over earlier, the official sources that they do choose are wrong almost all the time. And there's never a penalty for that. CNN, they will lie when you remember the gas attacks in Syria and how all the media outlets, they were reporting it as if Bashar al-Assad was gassing his own people, and we have to intervene and we have to protect the people in Syria. Well, it turns out months later, the people in charge of the chemical weapons investigation, the international group, the OPCW, their top scientists were saying that the investigation was manipulated. They weren't allowed to introduce evidence that went counter to the official narrative of OPCW, that this was done by Bashar al-Assad. So the top scientists, and then later on the head of the OPCW, says that this was all of this, there's a giant cover-up, and that Bashar al-Assad wasn't responsible for those gas attacks. CNN was reporting that, MSNBC was reporting that, Fox News, ABC, they were all reporting it. And none of them got their channels demonetized. None of them got their channels taken down. None of them had to remove the video. None of them got a strike on the channel. For none of it. So this weird thing that they have when it comes to the news and politics genre, where they will only recommend you if you're a trustworthy source, is, again, it's a weird arbitrary line that they're drawing, that only they use that rule only for independent content creators. And like I said, this was something that people in news and politics on YouTube have known for a while. David Pakman, as you all know, I have my disagreements with him, but back in 2019, he did this video. At the time, I think he had like 700,000 subscribers, and there was this website that has the data of how many times different content creators or different channels were recommended on by YouTube's algorithm. And you can see before, I think it was like May 1st of that year, I wasn't recommended as much because they were already, this was already after like the adpocalypse, and they did the crackdown on independent content creators on YouTube. But still, there was a giant decrease so after May 1st of that year, the amount of times that YouTube would recommend independent channels, it dropped 90%. 90%. So David Pakman said at the time for his channel, that was 3 million views a month. So they are on purpose burying their content creators to only recommend and to make it so that the only people who can even exist on YouTube are the ad friendly corporate news media. And it's just crazy that the YouTube CEO, because they wouldn't admit this for months and years, they would not admit this. Once you get to a certain level, I don't have one yet, but I think it's after like 50,000 or 100,000 subscribers, you get a representative that you get to speak to at YouTube if you have problems. They never really get to solve any of your problems, but you just have somebody you can speak to. And everybody would ask them about this because there was like I said, there was a giant difference. And it went from nobody watching CNN videos on YouTube to them getting millions of views, and then nobody seeing any of the independent content creators. So everybody was asking about it, and all the time the YouTube would lie to be like, oh no, we're not treating anybody any differently. But clearly that wasn't the case, and the CEO is admitting it right here. She talks about how there upsides and downsides to the way they change the algorithm, and she brings up this straw man. Well, she says, they have to do it this way because there's some people spreading misinformation or whatever. And then she brings up the straw man of the Las Vegas shooting, and how after the shooting there were some people on YouTube and they were just saying, I don't know, a bunch of fake shit about it. Okay, so because some people, billions of people have access to this platform, anybody could get on and say anything. But because somebody said some shit, made some shit up about a mass shooting, now it's justified to bury the entire genre of independent news. That makes absolutely no sense. I wasn't doing anything like that. Secular Talk wasn't doing anything like that. The Jimmy Dore Show wasn't doing anything like that. The Convo Couch, Nico House, Kim Iverson. Nobody nobody who's in independent news media, the most popular voices, none of us were doing anything like that. So it's a weird thing to act like just because some people were wrong on an issue, therefore we can't trust anybody to ever talk about news ever, and we could only recommend videos from corporate media. And again, like I said, and a million other times in a million other videos I've done on this channel, corporate media is wrong about shit all the time. You remember when CNN, when Chris Cuomo, the fucking clown that he is, he was interviewing Bernie Sanders about Medicare for All, about single payer, and he had a whiteboard, and he was talking about, it was just like the dumbest thing. I wish I pulled up the video before I started recording, but he's talking about socialism and how can we afford it and all types of stupid shit like this. And this is a newsman on a primetime news outlet on one of the most powerful channels in the country, and he's pretending like in the richest country in the history of the world, we can't afford to give people health care, even though every other advanced country on the planet has figured out how to do it for decades. So on purpose, just lying and pretending like the only way we can do healthcare is this for-profit private health insurance scam that we have going on. And again, so that's fake news. That's misinformation. Are they going to yank CNN from YouTube? Are they going to demonetize their channel? No, they're not. No, they're not. So it's wild to me that now, because they can point to instances of, like I said, any rando on the internet doing some making up a conspiracy theory. Well, now, of course, we can't allow anybody to say anything about news because everybody's like that. Well, they don't apply that same standard to corporate media when they're lying about shit. When they just, for 4 years, they went around pretending like the president of the United States was like some Russian agent, and Vladimir Putin stole the election and installed Donald Trump as president. For 4 years, they did this conspiracy theory, completely baseless, no evidence. They did a whole Senate investigation. They had a special prosecutor. They had investigations in the House. Came up with nothing. So again, when are the conspiracy theorists in mainstream media who are pushing that bullshit endlessly breathlessly for 4 years to the and didn't talk about any of the important issues. Are you gonna demonetize their channel? Are you gonna stop recommending their videos? No. And this gets to the what the real issue is. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, back in 2016, there was this adpocalypse. The corporate, some of the advertisers who spend billions of dollars on ads on YouTube, they said that they found some of their ads on like a neo-Nazi white supremacist video or whatever, and they don't want their ads on controversial videos and yada yada. And ever since then, YouTube has bent over backwards and tried to they've done this giant censorship campaign to crack down on anybody who can be called controversial, or anybody who isn't ad friendly. If you curse in your videos, if you're critical of both the Democrats and the Republicans, anybody who isn't ad approved, ad friendly, they are trying to remove them from their platform, and it's specifically to at the direction of their advertisers. So yeah, you can say they're a private company. Nobody's arguing that. But the real question is, should they be a private company? Nobody, the reach that they have is unmatched. Nobody can create a website and post their content on it and get the same amount of reach that you can from being on YouTube or being on Google. It's literally the largest search engine in the world. So if they're this private company and they have 100% discretion over the content that people get to see, well, then specifically when it comes to news and information, then they literally get to decide what you get to see. All at this point, all anybody's allowed to see is CNN and MSNBC, ABC, and Fox, and all the rest of the mainstream media outlets, the corporate media outlets. Even though they're wrong all the time, even though they will lie on purpose to mislead their audience, that's the only information that you're allowed to see. And anything that is counter to that, anything that provides a different point of view, you're not allowed to see it. And that's why there's just this weird disconnect of people are just so wildly ignorant about what's happening in this country in regards to politics and policy. It's not just because people are stupid. It's because they don't get this. They don't have access to this information, and it's going to be even harder now because the YouTube and Facebook and Google and Twitter, they've all decided as a cabal, as they did with when they gave Trump the internet death penalty, they've decided that they don't want anybody to do independent news anymore. So they're going to make it as hard as possible. So it's just crazy. It's wild. And if you're okay with billionaires deciding what information you're allowed to see, if you're okay with the only information, the only news that that you and anybody else in the country is allowed to see, it has to be approved by oligarchs at Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Google. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but that doesn't sound like a recipe for a functioning society. It sounds like they'll provide the news that doesn't rock the boat and that defends the status quo, and you know the shit show will just continue. The people won't really understand the issues that are going on in the country. They don't understand that it's not the Republicans, it's not the Democrats. It's that both parties are bought off by corporate interests. That both of them, that we basically legalized bribery in the country, and the government is for sale, and the people with the most money and the most power are the ones running the government. That's what the real issue is. And they will never say that on corporate media. They will never say that in CNN. They will never say that in the Washington Post. They will never say that in the New York Times. They want you. They'll continue the theater of the partisan hackery, and they'll make everybody think that all the problems in the country will be solved if you just vote out the other party and vote for the blue team or you vote for the red team. And people are going to keep doing that shit, just like they did in 2020, just like they did in 2016, even though shit keeps getting worse because they don't have any alternatives. People aren't presenting any other alternatives. We're just gonna continue the same pattern of doing the same shit and electing corrupt politicians to serve corporate interests, and which is the exact opposite of what's in the best interest of the public. So it's crazy. It's not just like like I said, it's not like a petty personal grievance I have with YouTube at this point. Even though yes, it does affect my business, but I just think this is something that everybody should be outraged about. Or at least there should be a conversation about it. At least, let's all just get together one day and decide, do we want the only information provided to us to be from billionaires and corporations? Or do we want to be able to have access to alternative news sources if we so choose? Let's at least have the conversation. But the way things are now, it's just everybody just shrugs their shoulders and they say, oh, it's a private company, they can do what they want. And it's just not even discussed. So it's just wild. The CEO of YouTube admitting that they're trying to bury their content creators. And by the way, the content creators that made YouTube this popular. Because before, nobody was watching CNN, MSNBC, or anything like that. People were watching news on YouTube, it was independent news that they were watching. And now that ever since they brought the advertisers into YouTube, they've tried to turn it into basically TV. Even though everybody came to YouTube to get away from TV and the shitty content that you'd find on TV, because all the radio stations, all the TV stations, they're owned by like 5 different companies. So there is no diversity of opinion. People went to YouTube to get away from that bullshit. And because now there's billions of dollars in ad money invested in this, they want to make this into basically TV online. And obviously the quality of the content is shittier. And this is just the path that YouTube's going on. So I don't know, man. It's looking rough out here for independent content creators. I'll say that much.